Welcome to the MetPro Method podcast. I'm your host, Megan Omli. Today, I'm joined by our usual host and lead coach, Crystal O'Keefe. Today, we're going to mix things up a little bit, and I'm going to be interviewing Crystal about her training journey after injury. Crystal, thank you so much for being here today.
I'm so honored. This is so fun. Thank you for doing this, Meg.
Of course. I love this. We're changing things up, and I'm excited to hear more about your training journey post-injury, too.
Well, what would you like to know?
Gosh. Okay. So let's just start from the beginning, which I already know a lot of this stuff, but tell me or tell everyone, what have you been training for?
So there is a marathon that is super, super famous in California called the Big Sur Marathon. And it's a regular marathon course, but they have a ton of different distances that you can do. And one of the ones that they have is a 21-mile course. And so I had been training for that. I have a very slow run pace, and the cutoffs for the actual marathon are super strict. It's like you have to be done by I think it's 13:45 per minute, which isn't that awful, but the course is incredibly hilly.
Right.
So I was not confident in my abilities because I've never done a marathon before. So I was not confident.
I know. I was going to say this is two things. It's a marathon plus anybody who knows Big Sur, California knows wow, okay, that's a reacher for the hills.
Exactly. So I had opted to do the 21-mile course, and that one, it starts at the same time as the marathon, but it starts obviously 5 miles down the road. So you have 18 minutes and 45 seconds per mile, which
I see what you did there.
It's a lot more doable, right? And they have a lot of runners and walkers, so I don't feel as pressured. And that was my thought process. I've done half marathons, and I thought this would be a good bridge to get from. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. Very cool. And a gorgeous place to do so. My goodness.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to travel to do, any of these events, I feel like you got to go big because
absolutely.
I know that there are people that would probably disagree with me, but I've looked at a lot of events in Missouri and they're a little on the boring side. So I like to go, I like to make it a destination when I do these things.
Absolutely. And so tell us, when did you start your training? More officially.
I actually started my training back in November of 22. And so for those listening, may not be listening the second this came out, this is mid-April of 23. Yes. So it's been a while. And I had already been running, but I hadn't really been focused on building my endurance. So at that point, my real focus was just get the miles on. I wasn't focused on a specific training plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so now too, we know what you were training for. Now, tell us exactly what happened that caused the injury.
Yeah, so I got in a fight with an SUV while crossing the street.
That is one way to say it.
And
wow, yes.
And I lost. It turns out the human body is not a big fan of being hit by a car. In all seriousness, I was out training for a run. I had my fastest ever PR the day before. And I was just out doing a quick 1.5 miles. For me, it was a shakeout run, 45 minutes out and back. And so I was feeling really good. I was running right by my house. I remember so vividly thinking, oh, I'm right at a mile. And I was in the crosswalk, and this brand new driver, 16-year-old girl, just got her license. She was making a left on a yield and did not see me and crashed right into me. I will spare the graphic details, but I skidded across the pavement, and I don't remember any of it. I just woke up in the middle of the street and I was like, what just happened? And I really think, I believe very strongly that my phone being in my leggings that day, because I was wearing a pair of leggings that had pockets and I had my phone in it. And I think my phone saved my leg, because so many people I've talked to, including a fellow coworker, had kind of a similar thing happen to them. And they did not have a phone in their pocket, and it hit in the same place. And they had a lot of stitches. And other people I've talked to have had that happen too. So. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Crazy. Okay. So you were hit by a car and obviously taken to the hospital, right? I know we're sparing the gory details, but just to understand, the severity of, you weren't just knocked to the ground. No. She wasn't just going 4 miles an hour.
No.
Right.
Yeah, she was going about 35 miles an hour. According to onlookers, that was the estimate. And apparently I flew through the air and landed on the left side of my head, which you can still see a little bit left.
Absolutely.
And I broke my left collarbone. And there were pieces of my spinal column that were broken off, like the pieces that go outward.
Wow.
There were 3 of those broken. And I didn't find this out till later, but I actually had a partially collapsed lung. And what else? Oh, and a major, like this was a major concussion and road rash from the top of my shoulder blade all the way down to the top of my thigh on my left side. So like I slid across. So it was definitely not nothing. And it was very scary. I remember being in the ambulance. I remember sitting on the ground and the cop came up to talk to me and he was like, "Are you okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, but I'm really tired. I'm just going to lay down," because I was sitting up. And he was like, no,
No, you're not going to actually go to sleep. No, we're not doing that.
And like something in the back of my brain was like, oh, this is like a bad thing. Like if you have a head injury, you're not supposed to go to sleep. And so I was like, okay, I can do this. Like I can stay awake. And it wasn't long after that they had me in the ambulance and on the way to and I heard the ambulance driver calling in all of my injuries, and that's when it started to sink in, like how bad this was. Yeah. And I was like, am I going to be okay? And she was like, we're going to do our best. And, you know, I know she was just trying to be comforting, but like at that moment, I lost it. You know, I was just, I was really scared. And, that I have to say, I am not a person who does things in a way to get injured. Like I've never actually been injured in my life. I've never had a broken bone. I've never had to be rushed to the hospital for anything. Like it was a very new experience. One that I do not recommend. 0 out of 5 stars. Do not do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So where in your training period did this occur?
So this occurred about 13 weeks out from the event. And so, you know, I didn't know at that time, like, am I really going to be able to do this? Am I still going to be able to do Big Sur? And in fact, I asked the original doctor that came in, the ER doctor, and then like every person that came in after that, I asked. And they kept saying yes. I was so surprised. And they were like, why do you care about this right now?
You're going to be okay. Yes.
Yeah. Once I knew that my brain was not bleeding and I did not have a spinal cord injury, which were the 2 things I was worried about, then I was like, okay, so Big Sur. And they were like, yep, you can do it. And I was like,
be back.
Wow. Okay. Like really? Because at the time I couldn't move, like sitting up was impossible. Getting out of bed was impossible. It seemed impossible to think like, oh, I'll be able to run in weeks time. Like that did not seem like a thing at all.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So then asking, you know, about that, how did you go about getting back to your training?
Yeah. So pretty much the first week was kind of a blur. The concussion symptoms were pretty bad that first week. And then sometime during the second week, I was able to get up and down without assistance. Like my husband felt comfortable leaving me to go to work. And I was like, okay,
right.
I can start moving again. And, you know, I was like, I can be a little hard headed. So I was like, oh, I'll just like try to walk on the treadmill. And Tom was like, my husband was like, yeah, why don't we talk to the doctor before you start doing that? And so
start Tom. Yeah. First.
And so we went for a visit to my general practitioner as a follow-up to my concussion. And, you know, they basically said, let your body be the guide. And so I just started with just slowly walking on the treadmill. And I did let my body be the guide. And during the concussion, again, I'd never had an injury like this before. I wasn't exhausted when I walked, but later I was incredibly exhausted during the day. And then the other interesting thing about it was I couldn't sleep well if I overdid it. So if I like tried to exercise or tried to do anything, it was almost like when you're a kid or like you have little ones, you know, like they get overstimulated. That's what my brain was doing. It was like, it was really weird. It was a very weird sensation that I didn't recognize. So And then, I was unsteady on the treadmill. And so, I wore the little clip and I did the whole thing to be safe. And I always made sure somebody was at home. I mean, at first it was
Absolutely.
like, even taking a shower, I was like, everyone, I am taking a shower. Like, if you hear any loud noises, come get me.
Come get me. And so when you first started walking on the treadmill, how many weeks post-injury was that?
That was 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Okay.
And it was a very slow. It was a very slow walk. Like, just to be clear.
Okay. Right. You start somewhere. That's the big thing, right? Returning from injury, you have to start somewhere and not starting too fast. Right?
Absolutely. And to be perfectly frank, I am terrified of cars now. And so going outside, that was too much for me. I was not ready to go outside.
Yeah.
So the treadmill felt safe. That felt like a safe place. And I really was kind of feeling a little crazy not moving. Like it was just sitting down all the time. And especially that first week, honestly, the most painful thing that I experienced was the road rash. It was just the most painful thing I have ever experienced. And so when I got past the point where like that had stopped hurting so badly, I really just wanted to move. And the pieces on my lower back that had broken off, they created this inflammation in my lower back. So picking up my feet was almost impossible that first week. And then as that started to get better, and that was really my like, okay, I can start walking on the treadmill when I could pick up my feet. And it still was pretty heavy, but a nice very slow walk. And it was slow that first time I did it. And then I didn't do it again for like 3 days after that.
Okay. That was going to be my next question. So that was pretty fatiguing. And it was like, okay, take a minute.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was only a 20-minute walk and it was so slow. And I was like, oh, I'm being too easy on myself. And then like that night I was like, I was not too easy on myself. And it was super exhausting. Good. Yeah.
Yeah, being realistic, that was really important, especially after injury. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, so let's progress that a little bit, right? I do want to ask, MetPro, right? What were you doing food-wise during this time? How are you starting to obviously refeed, refuel? I know acutely, like right post-injury, it was probably a completely different story, but what did it look like to start to eat better to fuel yourself as well?
Yeah, great question. The immediate response right after was like, I just kind of did whatever I wanted. And then as I started to get back into, okay, we need to like actually focus on the nutrient side of things. There had been people that had sent me things like soup and stuff like that. And I focused on like trying to round out, like, so if I had chicken noodle soup, for example, I would add additional chicken to it just to make sure I had the protein. I made sure to stay up on my vitamins. Even at the hospital, they were super like they were very focused on make sure to take these vitamins every day.
Interesting. Wonderful. That's great. Yeah, that's great.
And so I made sure to get a good variety of vegetables, even if at first my focus was not on like eating perfectly or even eating on like the MetPro plan. My focus was just on having foods that were nourishing, even if they weren't the perfect amounts. And so
absolutely.
That was my big thing. And obviously my level of activity had dropped so much that like I wasn't as hungry. And so, a lot of times it would be like a big veggie meal with like protein. And that's kind of what I stuck with for a little bit. Yeah. But then as I started to be able to do more, even just get around the house easier, I remember so vividly the day that Tom felt comfortable letting me walk down the stairs without the lights being on first thing in the morning. He was like, okay, he would like,
okay, you can leave the lights off, honey.
Exactly. And I could walk down the stairs without like grabbing onto the railing and like really going down slowly. And as I started to be able to get around the house a lot easier, that was when it was like, okay, now I can have like a turkey sandwich for lunch, and I could have for dinner, I could still have simple meals, but they were like a little bit bigger, and I could start to focus on more like, here's the types of food that I should be eating. But I still could keep my portion sizes down a lot lower just because my activity was so much lower.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And so when did you know it was time to really kick back into your routine where you felt like, okay, I'm ready. I feel good. How many weeks and how did you kind of navigate that?
Great question. So it was about 2.5 weeks into the injury. I went to a physical therapist.
Okay. I was going to ask about that.
Yeah, I was really nervous about my shoulder because I could only lift my arm to like here. And I was like, oh dear. Like I mean, and so for those of you not looking, like I couldn't lift it up even with my shoulder. That was as far as I could go. And I was very concerned about that. And before the first hour was up, they had my shoulder completely back to mobile. It was crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's great.
They said it was just
to move things a little differently.
Exactly. They said it was kind of just like lack of use and is kind of like a rusty hinge. And so they got it going, and we immediately started working on leg stabilizers, and they had this amazing thing that I had never even heard of, where you like, you know how you put a blood pressure cuff on and it starts. Okay. Well, they did that to my legs, because they have, so they've done studies that say that like if they reduce the blood flow, that it actually increases the human growth hormone, which helps so much with healing. And so since it was so early on into the process, they felt that was important. We only did that a couple of times, and that was just so easy to do, like such a simple thing. And then, so every week I would go twice a week, and they had me just doing all kinds of things, stability and stuff. And then they basically said, well, you'll know when you're ready to run. Yeah. And it was about, I think, 4 weeks in where I had been out walking. I had felt brave enough to go outside. I wasn't on the main street.
At you. That's big, right? That's big.
It was. And I have to be very transparent. I did not go on the main street where I got hit, but like in my neighborhood. And I still have not gone out to that big street. I don't know that I ever will. But the neighborhood felt safe. And so I walked around the neighborhood and I felt like jogging. So I told,
okay, there it is.
4
weeks later. Wow.
4 weeks later, and I started jogging, and it was a very slow jog. And then it just kind of progressed from there. And every week I could do a little bit more and a little bit more. And then it was actually just 3 weeks ago today. The physical therapist was like, go to town, do anything you want. Just
no restrictions.
He was like, no restrictions, and just we'll see where you're at in 2 weeks. And I went for my checkup yesterday, and we're still working on alignment with my right knee and making sure everything's good. But it's more like maintenance prep for Big Sur than it is like we have to fix things at this point. So, but yeah, I'm back to running. I'm able to do sprints again. I'm able to do hills. I have no issues. My shoulder's totally fine. It's amazing. It really is amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So tell us about your training now. And kind of how you're feeling about the 21 miles, and, maybe just a little bit about goals. Did you have to do a mental resetting, right? Of, hey, what am I going to look to accomplish for these 21 miles after all of this?
Yeah. I'm going to start there. Yes, I absolutely had to reset, because my original goal was to run a lot of it and kind of do that walk-run method, the Galloway method. That was my thought process. And I have a couple of people from my Peloton world that are going to be out there, and we were going to be running it together. And they're still going, by the way. But yeah, after this happened, my goal had to shift, because this is no longer going to be like the longest distance I've ever run because I don't know what I can accomplish. I haven't had time to do those long training runs on the weekend where it's like I'm able to do 4 hours straight. I haven't gotten back to that. I mean, I'm definitely running. I feel really good, but I haven't even had time to build up to that. I have no idea what's going to happen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I do know that a couple of years ago, I walked an entire marathon on my treadmill. So I feel confident that I can do it. But of course, there are those big hills in Big Sur. So I've had to reset my expectations to go with the flow, and be appreciative that you are alive, be in the moment, and be with your friends and enjoy the scenery. And so that has become, instead of this being like this big moment for me, it's just a celebration that I'm freaking here. Absolutely. Yes. That is a mental shift for sure, but a thankful one too.
too, right?
Absolutely.
You get to get out there and you still get to walk it. And like you said, enjoy the beautiful scenery and see some friends and do all of that. So that's wonderful.
Yeah. And as far as my training goes, I've been doing running like 3 to 4 times a week. And I've been alternating with strength days. And then on my weekends, I have been doing a long run, but it's like the longest I've gotten to has been 75 minutes, which is no slouch. It's not a slouch or anything.
No, it's not. Yeah.
But obviously a long way from 21 miles.
Quite where you had hoped to be at this point.
Correct.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. And that is okay, right? As we just said, being able to get out there is really important. Okay. So that's training. How about fueling right now? What are you doing in that respect? How are you preparing for that?
So right now I am focused on just keeping my intake steady. I have really struggled with the sugar, the kind of like addiction that I always deal with. And like, during that time, I had a lot of treats when I first got out of the hospital, first got home, and people were so nice and sent me things.
Sending you chocolates and all the things.
And
I know.
And even Angelo was like, if ever you deserved ice cream, it's now. So yeah, I absolutely did that. And I did deserve it, but I'm having trouble letting it go, just to be completely transparent. And so right now, my goal is just to be like consistent on my fuel. And then those longer runs that I've been doing, I haven't gotten long enough that I need to add a ton in. So like an extra little bit of carbohydrates goes a long way when you're just right at that threshold of an hour to an hour and 15 minutes.
Absolutely.
And so I haven't really had to change much as far as the MetPro plan goes. I've been able to keep that. And luckily I've had so much experience that I'm very confident, like the day of, having a few gels, having some extra hydration, and I know that I'll be fine. And it's not a very hot course out there, luckily. So
you're going to have the opposite problem, probably.
I will.
Yeah, right here. It was 36 degrees this morning. Ooh. So hopefully a couple more weeks, it'll be warmer for you.
I will say I'd much rather run in 36 than 80. Like any day.
Love it. That's great. Oh, I loved hearing this story. Is there anything else, any other pieces of your journey that you think would be helpful for all of us to know and just to share with you?
I think I just would like to share, I did not realize the importance of having a physical therapist. I think a lot of people are so used to doing things on their own, suffering through things on their own. And the things that they have been able to do with one session, like this past week, my knee was kind of freezing up after I'd done a bunch of step ups. And really, it was just my hip wasn't open all the way. And I know logically a lot of us know these things, but I don't think people realize how quickly those things can be addressed. I mean, by the time I left, I felt really good. My knee wasn't bothering me. And that was 40 minutes of just changing things. So, look, there is a time and a place for doing things on your own and persevering and pushing through. There is also a time and a place for getting help and not being afraid to ask for help and not being afraid to look to experts, because that is what they are there for. So
absolutely. I said something like that earlier today to a client. I'm like, I don't want you to figure that out. That's my job. Let me do it.
Exactly.
So, absolutely. That's awesome. Good. Well, you and I are going to chat after the event, which is in, a little bit of time here, but I will look forward to hearing all about how it goes.
Well, I'm excited. I hope it all goes well, and hopefully I'll have something good to tell you.
It will. It's going to be amazing. And yes, you will. You'll have a great report regardless of how it all goes. So good. Well, thank you, Crystal, so much for your time today. Listeners, that's all this week. You can find all of the MetPro Method episodes anywhere you get your podcasts or at metpro.co/podcast. Please be sure to follow the show and rate and review. That lets other people know what they can expect from the show. I'm your fill-in host, Megan Omli, and I will be back next time. Until then, remember, consistency is key.